Evidence-based policy making for sustainable cities. When we say evidence-based policy, I remember something. 6 months later the election, one mayor on a TV show was mocking himself. He was saying, well, before the election, he said the transportation will be free for the retired people, and he did it. But because he didn't know how many retired people were there in his city, he said the public transportation started to show loss because there were many people. And he became the public transport free for the retired. So I tell mayor candidates to be careful about that, because they have promises, but you have to have evidence for it. Which city, which neighborhood, which part of the street you should do what. So, numbers don't get instructions. Numbers do not tell lies, and numbers do not have ideologies or parties. And the numbers give you many clues about what you should do, but you have to understand the story behind it. Therefore, evidence-based management is very much important in companies, in municipalities, in administrations. So, people working on evidence-based policy making wants this to be done in a way that it deserves. So we have speakers, and we will listen to them first, we will hear them first, and then we will have a Q&A session. Well, first, you might receive questions from the tablet. First, we will hear Ayşegül Taşöz Düşündere. You would like to present here? Yes. Okay, then the floor is yours. Hello everyone, I am Ayşegül Taşöz Düşündere. I work in TEPAV and I'm a project coordinator. Evidence-based policy making is what we do, but very fast I would like to introduce what we do in TEPAV. TEPAV is a foundation that was founded in 2004, working on economy policies, and we were supported by the Union of Chambers and Commodity Exchanges, and we work on development, competition power, and economic integration, entrepreneurship, innovation, localization, urbanization, social policy, law, security, macroeconomy, education are our themes. As I said, it was founded in 2004. We had joint projects with different foundations and partners, and we were the head of the T20 for a while. We have international projects with OECD, World Bank, European Union. We work with ministries and top the Union of Chambers and Commodity Exchanges, and private companies. We have regional and local partners as well, like municipalities. This photo shows the countries that TEPAV has cooperated with. If it is blue, that means TEPAV worked there before. So TEPAV is not working in Turkey alone, and they help the regional economies integration with Turkey and doing it in different dimensions. So what about the local activities? We have a bunch of them. On this map, the blue shows the cities TEPAV had projects in. We still haven't completed the 81 cities in Turkey. We should do so. For sustainable cities, how can we use the big data for sustainable cities in a evidence-based policy design. Where are we today? There are some projects TEPAV did, and I will explain to you what are those projects. I'll explain you how we ensure local development and gender equality and work and economic growth, lowering the inequalities, sustainable cities and communities are the areas that we produce policies on. How can we use the big data to help municipalities produce big evidence-based models? And GDP are also worked on. How do we localize it? And then we will have detailed information and segmentation capacity. If a knowledge is not defined, how can we use it in the municipality or at the neighborhood level, district level, street level? And what about the examples? For instance, people coming from Syria, for instance. How much do we hear about them in the news? The social integration, is it sustainable or not? Small good practices can be lost, so we should have them, we shouldn't lose them. I will show you a small example. And then what can we do? I'll talk to you about that. 2 project ideas will be mentioned, 2 different applications will be mentioned. By the way, dear Ayşegül will do that in 10 minutes. 10 and a half minutes. I have 15 slides. It looks I'm okay. Let's start with the night lights. This is a space photo. So the more illuminated the places, the more economic activities can be seen there. So this is a high correlation finding, we can say. So with this knowledge, we can calculate the income of a certain area. We already have this information, but when we look at the 1987-2001 GDP, and when we compare it to 2004-2017 GDP, we see what has changed. Sometimes you have to wait long before the GDP is announced. So while you are defining your policies in a certain region, you have to define the economic activities there, and we use the night lights to do that. Can you please warn the moderator to turn off his microphone? And when you look at the correlation results, there are, thank you very much, there are different inputs from the companies. For instance, we can go and take inputs, economic inputs when we assess data. So when we define a policy for a place, we have to know where was it and where is it now. In Turkey, for instance, we have the middle income trap. For instance, Kocaeli, Istanbul and Ankara are over middle income trap. When we can break down these analyses to the municipalities, to the districts as well. And as I said, we can also have a long-term analysis of the history. So, is everything about economy? No, sometimes you have to check the social data as well. As you know, the Syrians are important in terms of social integration, and some municipalities have very important policies in this regard. And including them in the employment, including them in the social life, requires different policies, and every city needs tailored policies. What did we do? between the years 2011-2018, when the Syrians first started to arrive in Turkey, by the way, what was the concept in media? Syrians were mentioned. We collected data. You can buy this data from the agencies by paying. But that means a huge amount of cost. But big data enables us to do it with zero cost in our office. Certain algorithms can be developed because big data is a big world and every question is a separate question and you have to answer them separately. How will you clean the big data? News can be fake, sometimes wrong statements are used. You have to just cherry pick them. How many Syrian people live in the district? If it is gray, it's less than the Turkish average. If it is yellow, it's more than the Turkish average. So the more yellow it is, more Syrians, that means. And the round, blue round shapes show how much news were made about the Syrians. Local news, by the way, because the big mainstream newspapers mostly focus on Istanbul and Ankara. So we check the local newspapers or local media. So Syrian people are more on the news where there are less Syrians. So what does that mean? People might not react to things they know or they see. They might react to something they do not know. So in Samsun, there aren't many Syrian people, but there are many news about Syrian people in Samsun. So they are not very positive, by the way, the content of the news in Samsun. Not very positive. Not negative, but not very positive. By the way, we should have different perspective. We have to hear the social life from different perspectives. What can the municipalities do? For instance, using Twitter, what do people talk? How are their perception? We can check Twitter to see how people perceive Syrians. And when we look at the words used in the news, what do we see? The bigger the word, the more they are used. At the local resources, for instance, kid, the word kid, immigrant, and help and family are mentioned. When we look at the national resources, we still see kid, Syrian, and immigrants. We are talking about people here who have been in Turkey for 7-8 years and they have been actively in Turkey. Economy, income, they are not mentioned. Business or starting up a business are not mentioned in the news, for instance. Here, this is for municipalities. We look at the strategy plan of all the municipalities and we check how many times the word women was mentioned. It's of course quite difficult to analyze all the municipalities in Turkey because there are many. So do they mention the word women in the municipality strategy plan? Well, if they do, we go and read it. So with this method, we can check any word, for instance, zoning, planning. Who mentions zoning planning more in their strategic planning? So with our method, you can just detect who uses the word women more and you can just go and read it. What do they want to know? What do they want to do about women? For instance, 6 Eylül, Balıkesir province have tweets on women and there are many words quoting women. So they mention the activities of women working in the NGO very much. We have another project. We did this for the Balkans. 6 countries were included. Non-EU member countries, by the way, they are not members of the EU. We try to understand the demands of the tourists and expectations of the tourists. The red are the Germans and the blue are the Russian. So they do not go to the same places. You might know the number of the Russian tourists or German tourists coming to your country, but this shows where they clutter, and you can take decisions accordingly afterwards. For instance, they went to a certain spot and they didn't go to the other spot. Why not? Because the transportation was bad. So what can we do? Yes, we worked in the Balkans for tourism, but we never did it in Turkey, but we would like to do it. First of all, tourism directly or indirectly contributes to the economy. It improves the social image and the image of the region. Well, we check the nationality of the tourist coming, but where are they coming? What about gender? With age group, which location do they prefer, or are there similar locations they could prefer, and did they visit those places, alternative tourism locations? So we can read this through Instagram or Twitter data. For instance, before we came here, we had a thing in Mudanya. Mudanya is a district of Bursa province, and 93,000 people live there. And we have these photos from Instagram. When we look Mudanya hashtag, we see that people shared hashtag Mudanya for more than 349,000 times, and Mudanya is a small district. And when we look at the location, there are more than 10,000 locations shared from Mudanya. So you get the big data, you structure it, and you clean it, and then you try to understand it, and try to understand the trend. So great, I had 45 seconds. In 45 seconds, what can I say? The world is changing and policy making is changing. While policies are assessed, you should approach it from different angles, and municipalities can use it. Where, for instance, with tourism, they can profile the tourists coming. When do the tourists come and where do they go? And are they coming to a forum, to a concert? They can understand the purpose of the visit, and they can understand the appealing spots or appealing destinations for tourists. For instance, there might be an appealing destination, but transportation might be difficult. So we always have new questions appearing, popping up behind. So we work on the municipality services in the alternative tourist destinations. What else can we do? The demands of the tourists are heard and passed to the municipality. This is social listening. What are the demands of the people from the municipality, the citizens do? So it is possible to follow them constantly. And the good thing about big data is it is never halted. As people breathe, they produce data. So we produce data on anything, actually: credit card, expenditures, our destinations in the city we live, etc. So thank you very much. It was very fast. Thank you very much. At least we could see what TEPAV can do with the big data. By the way, I'm the moderator, so I can pop up a few sentences or two. There is a legend as big data, but what matters is where you focus in big data, and how do you make sense of it, because it is lots of Excel tables and lots of numbers, but the meaning behind the numbers are important. Now we're going to hear Kenneth.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Kenneth Heijns. I work as a director for AMS Institute in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. It's very exciting to be here, and I would like to give my perspective on evidence-based policy making and the role that our institute, I think, plays in that realm in the city of Amsterdam and for cities nationally and worldwide. As a city, Amsterdam is no different than any other city in the world, facing big challenges. Changing environment, environmental perspectives. We have climate change, we have the changing mobility system, we have ambitions in being a fully circular city by 2040. We see the food system clogging up the city. Many different challenges, working towards a fully electric fleet of cars in the city of Amsterdam, posing big questions surrounding the electrical system. We have a huge number of tourists, as no doubt you are familiar with as well in Istanbul. I am one of those tourists currently. And being able to cope with these crowds also poses a big challenge for the city of Amsterdam. Now, talking about policy and evidence-based policy, we need to think about what do we mean by evidence. This is how we look at the city, working so closely as a scientific institute with the municipality of Amsterdam. We tend to look at the city as through an engineering lens. Look at the city as a way of putting new technologies to good use to improve the quality of life, to improve sustainability of cities, and so on and so forth. But we all know that that is by no means the only lens that we need to see our solution through. You also look at the city, and we just had a wonderfully inspiring talk about the power of data, but there is also the power of design. What kind of city do we wish to have? We need, obviously, digital engineering, and not to forget the lens through which we need to look at our policies and our solutions, humanities, the social perspective. If any one of these is not there, I'm quite sure we will not arrive at the optimal solutions. And you could also look through the lens of different organizations trying to contribute to solutions. So personally, I look through the lens of knowledge institutions. But we need our friends from industry too. We have, I just showed you a picture of some of the infrastructure in Amsterdam. If we need to redo the infrastructure and need to implement innovative solutions, then we need the industry to scale up and give the industry a path forward to scale up solutions. We also obviously need local government to together with citizens to contribute to what solutions are best for the city of Amsterdam. And so this is how I look to evidence-based policymaking. And for me, policymaking as an engineer also means bringing solutions to the city. It is about bringing multiple disciplines to the table. It's about bringing multiple actors to the table. And so if we join those lenses together, multiple disciplines, multiple actors, then we arrive at the institute that I am part of. AMS Institute was set up in 2013 by the city of Amsterdam, and we bring to the city engineering in an applied way and bring research, education, and innovation to the city to help find solutions to urgent societal needs. And we're not the only one using this philosophy. It is also the municipality of Amsterdam that embraces the philosophy of getting all these different perspectives on board and getting all these different actors on board. And each is recognized for its own role. Each is recognized for its own needs and wants. So knowledge institutions, obviously, are looking to generate new knowledge, and that is what we can contribute as AMS Institute. The private sector, obviously, is looking for a new business, keeping up with new innovations and being able to create new business models from that. And government is often looking for new norms, new ways of procurement, new ways of scaling up innovations to make the city even better than it is today. And so what we do as an institute of applied technology is maybe not so much different from any other university in the Netherlands or any university in the world for that matter. All of them do research, provide education, and bring entrepreneurship and innovation. But what we do is a tight integration with the municipality to start from the needs of the municipality and work our way backwards and see what expertise we need to solve those challenges. And that's what we call the living labs. And we take this concept of living labs not lightly. We use our city as our testing grounds, our field lab, have each and every project that we do embedded in the city and innovate right from the fabric of the city. That also means that we simply need the municipality to open up the city, make it possible to implement IoT sensors, to maybe design a new piece of infrastructure, to test new solutions right in the fabric of the city. Our institute is powered by Delft University of Technology, Wageningen University, and MIT from Boston, USA. Let me tell you a couple of things of what we actually do. Because if this is the concept, what is the actual action on the ground? Well, first of all, we bring a master's program to the city of Amsterdam, a 2-year engineering course, also sharing exactly this same philosophy, starting from the city's needs and educating our students to cope with those complex challenges and educate them in the interaction with the city, all from their technological discipline. And it's not only the 2-year master's degree that we provide, we also try to bring our professional education for the better use of municipalities. So this is an example where we brought an urban digital science course to educate our friends at the municipality to use the messy big data as was discussed in the previous talk. Summer schools, bringing in talents from all over the world to think about the solutions for a city like Amsterdam and learn from that and bring those back home. And of course, bring our education to the online space on edX. Our research and innovation programs are circled around these themes. I won't read them out aloud for you, but I'm sure that everybody recognizes these big themes as relevant for all cities worldwide. All of us are in transitions driven by new technologies, driven by climate change, and so on. I'll give you a couple of examples. A crowd monitoring system using big data, using social data to assist our safety and emergency services in the city of Amsterdam. And we'll be doing that for the SAIL event and for the UEFA 2020 event next year. Another example. If the circular system isn't fully circular and you're left with some residual plastic, could you also define a process by which you collect the plastic and print these wonderful pieces of furniture and reintroduce them into your city. This bench is the result of 1.5 times the plastic used by one individual over a year. And this startup sprang from AMS Institute and has now 10 people within the company and doing very well. Trying to make the ecosystem circular is also a question of getting to know where are your resources in space and time. Resources that are for some organizations waste, and for the next organization it's the resource to use in their production. Oh, we're going to watch the whole thing again. Thank you. Almost there. Yeah, so we are building a platform for connecting people who, organizations that have waste and organizations that need that material and use that in their production as a resource. We also help the city by measuring the climate, measuring climate change, trying to devise, to develop new solutions to the urban heat island effect. We need climate monitoring. And this project, using water bodies to cool the city, and not just the water bodies, but in using the trees in combination, and trying to come to new design principles based on which you can improve the city for years to come. Finally, I think this example really speaks, to me at least, is developing an autonomous boat to be spinning around the canals of Amsterdam. It may sound like a fun project, which it is, but it's also very necessary because the inner city of Amsterdam is being overused massively by heavy trucks, cars delivering packages, and the canal walls are a big challenge for the city of Amsterdam to maintain. Financially, a very big burden. So what if we can imagine an autonomous system based on the canals of Amsterdam collecting household waste? Not only would we then not have to use those trucks alleviating traffic congestion, but it also adds to a reduction in pollution, in noise, and in load on these beautiful historical canal walls. And a slide on entrepreneurship. We try to bring our students and our researchers into an environment where they can test their startup potential and scale up solutions that may stem from research or education, because we think business and startups are the power to change on a big scale. So finally, to wrap up, we start with the challenge. We want to work towards solutions. And these solutions might be policies, might be testing grounds for other parties to use, might be talent, might be research, might be startups. All of these are solutions, and that's where our institute sits in the middle, trying to help cities become a better place. So I invite you all, if you are in Amsterdam, please pop by to our institute, and I thank you once again for your attention, and have a very good conference.
Çok teşekkürler. Tabii.
Thank you very much indeed. It goes without saying that in order for this story to become a reality in Turkey, or for this story to end up in a success story, we need two things. First of all, local governments or national governments must be open they must be interested in what others have to say. They must be open to receiving stimuli from other partners. Secondly, local people must participate in the decision-making processes. If the local government is close to such things and does not let participation, they can only have a very limited area for play. But if local governments include the intellectual capacity and the citizens' capacity to their decision-making processes, things will be much different. Of course, the Netherlands is a very good example. Compared to Turkey, it's an extreme example actually, because they have a very good background for this. They have a very good infrastructure for this as well. So our next speaker is from United Nations Habitat.
Hi, good morning. I apologize for my voice that's breaking a little bit. So my name is Regina Orvañanos. I'm from UN Habitat, based in Nairobi. So as an introduction, UN Habitat is the United Nations agency in charge of working with local governments at city level on achieving sustainable urban development. So we work with local governments, and one question that we often confront is, how do we know if the policies of the government are actually working? How do we know, first of all, which priority or which measure to take? How do we measure if sustainable urban development and prosperity, if it's progressing or not? Or how do we know if the use of existing data, how do we make use of it to make the best decision of different alternatives that are present? So in this regard, in 2012, we started with the publication of our flagship publication measuring the sustainable prosperity of cities. This was a time when after the crisis of 2018, and we wanted to bring a different approach to urban prosperity, to move beyond economic prosperity towards a more looking at the city from an integrated approach. How the different aspects, governance, environment, social integration, urban infrastructure development, integrate and interact towards the prosperity of all its citizens. Later on, this what was born as an index was evolved into an initiative called the City Prosperity Initiative. And right now, it's the United Nations platform or framework for evidence-based policymaking for sustainable urban development. So what we do with cities is we help them the whole process of the connection between data and policy. We start by putting a local framework of data collection and to be able to measure the conditions, then to understand what factors are in place that make the city achieve where they are, how those factors promote prosperity or inhibit prosperity, and then how do you use that information to change through policies, action plans, strategies, and eventually how you monitor if these actions are being effective. So the City Prosperity Initiative has certain particularities. First of all, it can be localized to different contexts. As United Nations, we work with a variety of cities from developing and developed countries. And so we need to make sure that it's not a rigid blueprint, but they can be adapted to different contexts. Being based in a composite in a composite index, it can support looking at the different interactions of the sustainability aspect, how local economic development affects environment, how it fosters integration or social exclusion, and so on. In addition, as it is aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, it can be a a tool for the cities to monitor and report on progress on the Sustainable Development Goals and the New Urban Agenda. And it looks at the city at different scales of integration. And more important as well is the first index that incorporates spatial measurements into the index. I'll talk about them a little bit more in detail. So we have been working up to date in 500 cities in the world, in countries as varied as China, Vietnam, Saudi Arabia, Russia. So we're making sure that it responds to local needs that are, of course, different depending on the development level of different cities and countries. Well, we're fully aligned with the SDGs, but our main focus is using the index as a tool to foster discussion. So by making the use of a composite index, it has of course has some limitations, but it has the beauty that it makes complex problems of the city. It's simply to present them in a simple way to understand and have a discussion between different stakeholders. So when we're working about different levels, of course it has, depending on who the partner, you can have different approaches for evidence-based and the data that is used and the purpose of what this data is used. So from being used as a global monitoring instrument to know global trends in 500 cities and more. So what are the status of urban expansion in the world, of affordability of housing, of how is the trend towards reducing slums or increasing inequalities in cities. But then how, and I'll explain in the following slides these three examples of Argentina working at the national level, in Sao Paulo at metropolitan level, and in China from a city level and planning. So for example, in Argentina, we were partnering with the national government. Argentina is a large country, almost 4 times the territory of Turkey, and with a population of only 40 million. So we have a country with concentrations that are around Buenos Aires and very large disparities between the different countries. So what the approach we took, first of all, is to really know the conditions at country level, is to come up with a sample of cities. It will be impossible for the government to know the conditions of 300 cities. So what we did is to propose doing a statistical sample of cities that would be representative of cities in different sizes, different provinces, and over-representing those provinces and regions with less population, so that we would cover for the bias of that the majority of population is around the central, the Pampean region close to Buenos Aires. So next is to the information gathered. Now you can know the trends of cities by sizes and by regions, and identify the disparities. And now through this information, come with and support the national urban policy for reducing the disparities between different regions. And the third objective is then it was using the information at city level as a tool for the finance ministry to allocate resources based on the actual needs of the city. So if a small government wanted to ask for money for a new stadium, but they are really, really bad in education, so that you have a justification of your policies are not responding, or your needs are not responding to what the city really needs. Then we work, for example, in Sao Paulo metropolitan. That's a large city, 19 million people, with 39 different municipalities. So by collecting data at individual city level, we can also identify the disparities between the different municipalities across the different sectors that we're measuring. And so by identifying the challenges, but we could also measure how which of those municipalities were taking stronger benefits of the agglomeration economies, which were, an interesting finding is that the average of the metropolis, the results were higher than the average of the individual parts. So by working together, cities, they can actually achieve better, so they multiply the benefits of urbanization rather than add up benefits of urbanization. And we can do a statistical analysis of complex urbanization process. So we all know that economies of agglomeration are dependent on the population sizes. But then we can analyze the trends and see which ones of those municipalities are taking above the average of the trends in relation to their size. So which of those municipalities are taking more advantages of the agglomeration. As well, then we can do principal and components analysis of how these different actions interact and explain the results of a city. And how can you create policies that are not move away from sectoral policies to integrated policies that take probably transporting together with poverty reduction, with gender and public space, and in a package of integral policies that can work together for the benefit of the city. And later, the last example, working with Wuhan, 8 million people city in central China, we were acknowledging that city average are not enough for tackling urban local problems. The disparities in large cities, and you will know very well as well in Istanbul, the disparities within a city can be as large as the disparities between different countries. One city can have a really high development level, while the other one district can have really high development levels, and the other districts be in a very deprived situation. So in this case, we looked really in depth into the spatial components of analysis, because there's a limit for statistical information that there's the level of disaggregation that we can reach is not always what we would desire to achieve local plans and policies. So what we conceptualize as a spatial capital. So using the space that as valuing the space, the spatial configuration. So we evaluated different components of what makes good urban planning. The connectivity of the streets, the density, public space, accessibility to services, schools, medical facilities, density of services. And we indexed all this information. So we're assessing public space, quality, public urban planning. And we came to the conclusion of the analysis, of course, is this spatial capital or urban planning capital was concentrated in the center. But an additional discovery was that it was correlated with the prices of the housing market. So in the places where the space capital was highest, the price of a dwelling was also higher, meaning both the market and the people were willing to pay for a higher quality urban space. And this can be the first point for strong policies of improving public space, improving access to services, because this makes an economic sense for the city that will bring more prosperity, more access to different services. So finally, we do have I can summarize that we have three different approaches of how we complement the different streams of evidence into our policies and plans. So by reinforcing local monitoring capacities and processes, meaning helping cities doing data assessment, data collection, and the use of data, complementing with a strong spatial analysis, considering the urban space is not only the place where things happen, but is an active actor in how the city works. How can space be a factor for prosperity or inhibit or increase urban inequalities? So when we're talking about not leaving anybody behind, it's also not leaving any space behind. And finally, that is something new that we're incorporating since last year is the citizen perception. So by complementing hard data with live perception of experts on the same topics, we can cross analyze and also these different streams of information. And this is really has been quite an important insight, because not only can we know how the population think of how the problems of the city, but also identify that these problematics are perceived differently by women and men, by young people versus older people, by people that are new to the city that identify some problems, and people that have been 5 years or more, they see the city different and identify other problems. So at the end, what our main result is to bring to help cities produce evidence-based policies and plans, reports, and to achieve that these policies are incorporated into official planning documents. This can take different shapes: urban planning, strategic documents, vision 2030 of the city, metropolitan development plan, municipal development plan, and so on. So this is just some examples of what we have done. Thank you.
Çok teşekkürler. Şimdi efendim bu sıradaki konuşmacımız
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Seyfettin Gürsel. He can access the data which are also open to public, and he takes the data to a step forward actually. Would you like to speak from there or here? The floor is yours.
Ayakta ders anlatmaya. Merhabalar. Önce hemen şunu...
Ladies and gentlemen, let me first of all make an announcement. I'm not an expert on this topic, therefore I haven't prepared a sophisticated and handsome presentation. Then you may ask, why am I here? Who has invited me? I'll of course explain it, how I made it here. But first of all, let me briefly introduce myself. How long has it been? For 11, maybe 12 years ago, I established a research center, Bahcesehir University Economic and Social Research Center. We mainly focus on two topics: labor market and macroeconomic growth. We have regular research notes and publications. We have special and exclusive dossiers on specific topics as well. And 99% of the time we use data from Turkish Statistics Institute. We do not only benefit from their publicly available data, we also benefit from their special data, micro level data, which is not published to the public, but they share it with think tank organizations like ourselves. We also sometimes develop policy recommendations. Why am I telling all of this? I'm telling this because we are closely related with data. We work closely with data. My institution is called BETAM in short, and ever since we became a more popular organization, we have been approached by national and international organizations as well as public institutions like the ministries of development, finance, etc. And we also closely cooperated with the Statistics Institute of Turkey. Recently, by the way, I said recently, but it was 3 years ago, a semi-public body, namely İzmir Metropolitan Municipality, came to us, and the previous mayor of İzmir, Aziz Kocaoğlu, had been the mayor for many years, and he told me that it is high time for me to get retired. But before I retire, I want to understand how my services contribute to the development of İzmir. Could you make a research about this? This was his demand. He wanted me to make an analysis of or calculate how his services to the city as a mayor contribute to the development of the city. So, economists use matrices for inputs and outputs. We try to use such matrices, and we said, okay, let's take the job and we'll make such an analysis. We promised to make that analysis, but when we actually got hands-on with it, we saw that there was no data. The data available was very poor. I'm sure Turkish people among us know it very well, but for the foreigners among us, let me make an explanation. We have the Turkish Statistics Institute in Turkey, and they publish data at regional level. And İzmir constitutes a region in Turkey because it's one of the 3 largest cities. And the Turkish Statistics Institute had some rough data about İzmir actually, about its population, economic development. If it weren't for the statistics of TÜİK for İzmir, we wouldn't be able to go an inch actually. We try to fill the gaps. We will hear from the next speaker about the Statistics Institute. There are many detailed statistics actually which you can benefit from to make an analysis. So we try to conduct those research ourselves. And the municipality of İzmir also came to the understanding that the data they had at hand was not organized. The data they had in hand was very complicated, complex, and not categorized. So we worked closely with the experts in İzmir to first classify the data and secondly to make use of it to come up with an analysis. So we were able to deliver the result, but of course making such a big scale research on a metropolitan municipality was a very ambitious task. But to develop policies for a city, you have to have more detailed analysis. A large international foundation later on approached us and they asked for an analysis about the access of Syrian refugees in Istanbul to the labor market. The Statistics Institute of Turkey collects data about Syrians in Turkey, but they do not share it with anyone. So Syrian refugees in Turkey is a big, obscure room actually. We have a lot of urban legends about the Syrians, and we don't have any exact data or reliable data about Syrian refugees. So we decided to work with a field research company, but we understood that there are no records about Syrians. we cannot find a single piece of information which can tell us about whether they have access to labor markets in Istanbul. So, again, I'm going into too much detail. In a nutshell, we were able to take a rough picture of their situation and provide an analysis for that international organization. The other day, I had a meeting with the head of the Marmara Municipalities Union, and I took the opportunity to tell him that local administrations, local governments need better data to understand the circumstances and to develop better policies. You cannot expect everything from the Statistics Institute. So local governments have a great role, a significant role, to gather data, the population of Istanbul is almost as crowded as the population of the Netherlands. So I think Istanbul should create a local statistics institute for itself to collect data specifically for Istanbul. This was my recommendation to the head of the Marmara Municipalities Union. This local statistics institute can be established in Istanbul and they can work closely with the National Institute. So the chairman told me that this is a great recommendation and it should be promoted in the General Assembly. And he asked me whether it was worth it, and I said, yes, it's worth it. And the chairman assigned me, actually, to help the establishment of that Statistics Association or Statistics Union. This is why I'm here. I told this very long story to explain why I'm here, but it's why I'm here. Yes, from previous speakers, we heard about how you can fill in information gaps by using big data, but you cannot use big data for everything. In my understanding, there are two major areas which we need to gather data. The first area is the designing of social policies. We need to design social policies in a targeted manner. And the second area is transport. I want to focus on the first one. First of all, can we collect data to facilitate employment? I think it's possible. Can I cite the name of a municipality? Yes, of course. Well, the municipality of Beylikdüzü, a district of Istanbul, approached us the other day, came to us the other day, and they told us that they established this unemployment agency to find jobs for job seekers. It was a very surprising development for me because I understood that local governments can play a key role in finding jobs for people at the local level. But to do that, you have to collect data. As long as it's done based on legislation or legally, they can do anything, local governments actually. I'm not claiming that the problem of unemployment in Turkey should be resolved by local governments, but the small steps like this taken by local governments may help to overcome the problem of unemployment. Again, to do that, you need to collect data. The second area is that local governments can help women to participate in labor force. As you know, many women are trapped in their households to care for children and elderly. And most of them cannot work outside of their homes because of housework and because of their duties about care. But they can work outside of home if they're provided with some flexible solutions, like part-time work or work that they can do at home. Again, to start such an initiative or to create such policies, the local governments or municipalities must first understand how many women are in need of such flexible employment situations. To do that, they need to collect data. Obviously, we do not have that specific data at the National Statistics Institute, and you cannot find such data anywhere. However, if the local government designs a questionnaire specifically asking that question, data can be collected in no time. Another area where local governments can play a key role is the elimination of lack of equal opportunities in access to education. We know that education is becoming a serious problem in Turkey. People with a high income can send their children to private schools, and public schools are only for poor people, many people think. This is a big problem, and I'm not sure whether the Ministry of National Education is thinking thoroughly about this, or even if they have statistics, they do not share it with the governments or local governments. Another problematic area: can local governments play a role in fighting against poverty? What can they do? I'm sure there's a role for them to play as well, as long as it's not exaggerated. Speaking about Istanbul, we're talking about a population of 15 million people. Again, the National Institution of Statistics, TÜİK, has data about poverty, but these are national level information. Who do you call or who do you categorize in the group of poor people? And how the local government can support the low-income families by limited resources. It's not only for social justice, but also for equal opportunities in education, training skilled labor. So reaching out to those grassroots is very important. This is what the local governments can do when it comes to social affairs. The second area I mentioned earlier was transport. Yes, one of the major tasks of the local government, municipality, is to provide a functioning and operational transit system. When we drive in Istanbul, you see many people driving by themselves in a car. In the Western world, there are carpool lanes and there are strict rules about which cars can access to the city center. There are taxes and so on. Traffic congestion is a big problem in Istanbul. There are big mismatches because of differences between residential areas and commercial areas. Does the municipality have tools to analyze these problems? And does the municipality benefit from statistics about it? Which is why I believe that we have to establish a statistics organization only for Istanbul. When I suggested this to the chairman of the Marmara Municipalities Union, he invited me to deliver a talk about this in this panel. In local governments, let alone statistics about social affairs, there are no statistics about households as well. So the trend among municipalities is to fight against poverty, and in their election campaigns, the mayor candidates say that I'm going to reduce water bills by half. But when they make such cuts, they do not help the poor people. They only help the rich people, actually. In poor neighborhoods, the number of individuals in households is 4. So the discounts that you provide won't matter to them, actually, as long as you do not know anything about the number of people living in households. Because the reduction or the discount is offered only for the first 10 liters of water consumption. So if the family is crowded, they will still be using a lot of water, and that discount in the first 10 liters won't matter much to them. So let's move on to the next speaker.
Çok teşekkür ederim.
Thank you very much. I am Şebnem Beşe Canpolat. I am coming from the Technical Demography Institute of Turkey. I would like to thank everyone who has taken part in organizing this committee. It is indeed perfect, and we go timely. I would like to say that we are aware of the needs, we know the needs, and I would like to talk about 5 parts. I'm going to skip certain parts because I don't want it to be boring. What were we using? Why we changed it? What do we plan for the future? And we have a municipality research, and we have a representative from the registry systems department. I'm going to share with you the statistic resources, the citizen data, the international statistics agencies, agendas. So I will have a few slides on all of this. As you know, the Turkish Statistics Institution get data from agricultural counts, population counts, and industry and business places counts. Well, counting people or counting other stuff, of course, is costly, and the population is counted once in 10 years, for instance, and it gets old in a decade, you know. Sorry, the speaker says. All of this made us think evolving. In 1972, the nationality ID number idea was offered, and then we now have it all. Now the Turkish Statistics Institute can get statistics from the ID, national ID numbers. And this is very important in terms of data registries. As mentioned before, all the local management, all the planners and programmers in the state need some level of statistics. So that made us think we need evolving. Here we have an example. This is an envelope, and this is the address, so-called address. It says, well, pass the industry, and then there is the oil station, then go right, and there is a 5-6 story building. Go to that building, and there is a store there selling construction material. This letter is for that guy. But now we have a huge amount of data. We have numbers for the buildings, you know. So we think these are facilitators. When there is a population count, we were taking a photo of the population, but now we are constantly video recording actually. And in the future, as mentioned before, the big data, the citizen data, smart statistics, and the Netherlands example was mentioned. And we cooperate closely with the Dutch statistic institution, and we see that they are working for the future. They are making plans for the future, and that encouraged us to take a step. The professor before highlighted something. At the local level, data about the fertility or the number of the babies or the number of the deaths are provided, but we have to go deeper. We have to go to the backbone of the data, backbone of the information. This will enrich the structure. We have a project in this regard. It is open to development and updated constantly. So we want a database which is always active and updated constantly. The academics can make deep researches based on this database. So it looks a bit of complex. The dark blue ones are dealt with now. In the life cycle, we know when an individual is born or when individual died, and we also know the family types. Is it a nuclear family, for instance, in Adıyaman, or is this individual member to a family of a single parent, for instance? And the immigration recordings, we try to get more data about that with the statistics details. And the graduation, the school they graduated from and which sector they are working for are the sections we are working on now. This will restructure the database. And we have a disability related section here. The identity number is put here in order to inform you. We do not use the ID numbers. We do not see names. We have an anonymous number. We do not see the identity number of the people we have on our database. We have an anonymous number appointed to them, and we will use the employment status. If they are not working, for instance, do they need something? Are they students? So we want to establish a structure about employment too. So what pushes us in this regard? We have an official statistics program created for 5-year periods. We are in the 3rd year, and we want to create more statistics using the ideal registers. In 2020, we will have household count and a census, and this will be done throughout the world actually. But we spend lots of money conducting the censuses. Instead of that, we could build schools. Instead of holding censuses once in every 10 years, what we can do is to spend that money on other places. There are certain lacking things, of course. The 11th developmental plan underlines the need of an active database for population count or for a census. their cities can be managed in a more sustainable manner with this bundle of data as well. In 11th developmental plan, there is a decision that is also related to this organization. The decision making processes, planning processes and monitoring processes should be done in an evidence-based system, and in order to do that we need a socio-economic structure related integrated system. We have to do this till 2021. We have plan A, plan B. I'm not going to take too much of your time now for it, but afterwards, if you would like to learn the details, you can contact me. And within UNEC, out of 56 countries, 14 countries will do the censuses based on their active databases. There are certain countries in the world doing it already, actually. For instance, Spain has 46.7 million population. It is the biggest following Turkey. We have a regular population statistic that is being generated, but we also will add the database, active database, and we will do a big innovation, and our motivation is very strong. You read what I wrote on the slide, but I see that I can say that we have a household type. If there is a disabled individual in the household, then we will detail the employment status of the disabled individual. In household researches, as the professor mentioned before, especially in household employment researches, we cannot generate data at the local level, but we need it. So even if you generate data for Istanbul, the districts of Istanbul are very different from each other. The local governors, the policymakers need the details of the data, and when we establish this structure, we can also provide some contributors. And for 5 years, we have been bringing together all the institutions and emphasizing this. The geographic coordinations and are very important for geographic registers. Yes, we know the number plate of a building, but we don't know how far it is from a hospital or a fire brigade. In an urban transformation project, we do not know the type of population that will be affected. The spatial address register system will be finalized, and this is a project of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, by the way, and we will have information for an area of 1 kilometer, so 1 kilometer square. So if there is a change in the administrative borders, for instance, between the districts, then the data sets get impacted from that. This is true for the rural parts as well. For instance, if there is a noisy enterprise somewhere, the population, how much population will be impacted from this noise, the municipalities will be able to calculate that thanks to this integrated system. We are not explaining our data, getting information from the citizenship registry office, but in Turkey, for instance, life expectancy is 77 years, and we also explained the healthy life expectancy. For instance, there is always this saying, women live longer than men by 5 years, but in Turkey, for instance, women like 3.1 years in healthy living index. Women, for instance, can live 59.9 years. Men, can live 59.9 years without any diseases, but women can only live 56 years without any diseases. When we talk about the buildings, by the way, the construction year is important. Of the buildings that were constructed after the 99 earthquake are considered to comply with the legislations, and we think they are safe. But there are other factors, there are other factors that should be considered. We went to 1,300 municipalities and 30 metropolitan municipalities to assess the houses, the buildings, and we wanted to learn what kind of houses are inhabited by the people. What did we find? Well, they weren't very promising. I tried to write the questions on the slide so you can read it. Only 22% of the municipalities have the quality data about the buildings, and in 2011 census we asked the household whether they knew when the building they lived was built. This was a frightening table indeed. 19 million households were counted during the census, and the number of the people, the percentage of the people that live in the buildings that was built before 2000 is 66.9%. So a huge amount of people live in the buildings that were constructed before the earthquake legislation. In Istanbul, this number is huge as well. What about the municipality having this knowledge in the electronic environment? Only 35% of the municipalities have this knowledge in the electronic environment. Some of the municipalities have it on paper, but that doesn't help us. And we also asked whether they have the carrying system of the building available in the municipality. Only 29% of the municipalities have it. Is it a concrete building? Is it a steel construction? So very little number of municipalities know it. What about a fire stair and fire escape stair? Well, there was a fire recently, in a student's dormitory. Only there was no fire escape stairs, and that was big news in the media. So in case of an emergency, in case of a disaster, we can take precautions based on these data, and we do not know about them very much. All of the buildings constructed before 2007, only 7% of the municipalities, 7% of the municipalities have this knowledge. Bakırköy, Beyoğlu had it, if I'm not mistaken, and a few more. What about the house taxes? Everyone works with a different company about the estate tax, and they do not have a common software in terms of estate tax. Again, we have very little information held in the municipalities. I know I exceeded my time, but I'll do my best. As a result, we know that without the data, we can't do much. Municipalities will have to cooperate with us. Whichever municipality comes, we have these on paper, so we can just put them on the electronic environment, and we are open to helping municipalities. We always say it. The future data sources. We have international corporations. They use citizen data very much. It's not like Facebook, Twitter data. The citizens let the municipality have the data on voluntary basis. I would like to give you a few examples. For instance, in India, there is a platform. The citizens establish it. What did the citizens promise during the elections? School built here, etc. So they feedback the other citizens. The school was constructed or not. So the promises of the policymakers are actually followed up. Another example is elimination of lack of data. For instance, Canadian Statistics Office saw that there wasn't much data on the buildings. And the Statistics Office used application or implementation, and they said find your own building here and enter the lacking information. So the citizens did it. And in London University, the Goldsmith College had a project. The citizens collect data with different sensors. For instance, in order to measure the air pollution, the school gives them a tiny sensor they can carry in their bag, and they can follow it online. Or in order to perceive the nature, they take photos of the flora and fauna and they upload it. So they can cooperate, the citizens can cooperate with the universities. Last but not least, the Netherlands example, as Kenneth mentioned before. This is the daily data. For instance, we announced the number of the people living in Eminönü, but during daytime, since it's a business place, the daytime population is huge. What does Netherlands do? They use the cell phone signals, mobile phone signals, and they are using big data to detect the daytime population in a certain spot. So hopefully we will do that once in a year and maybe twice a year. Maybe the cellular phone signals can help us and contribute us in this regard. There is something I would like to underline here. These are not certain statistics. They are used as complementary data, complementary resources, and there are some experimental studies on them. And statistics institutions are discussing, can we take this as statistics or not? And the last one, the sensors from England. And I took this photo 1 month ago in Paris. They prevent the pollution with this bin. The people collect the butts and put it in the Rolling Stones or the other band. So it's kind of a competition. So I'll mention about the Syrians. We establish statistics about the Syrians who have a permit to inhabit in Turkey. But Syrians who are under temporary protection in Turkey are not registered properly, and we cannot produce data about them, but we need their data too, because in 2021 we have to count the number of the people living in Turkey, whether they are living in Turkey temporarily or no. We want to have a profile of the population, so we want to do it, but we do not have a framework. So we are in the same place like you. Microphone should be used. Well, we do not have the demographic values of that. We only have no information coming from the Ministry of Health. We do not include the death or birthday dates. And when we look at the Syrian infant deaths, well, it's 2-3 folds more than the Turkish population.
Sınırlı. Halbuki
Many data from TÜİK is based on districts, but you don't publish data at the level of neighborhoods. Well, at the level of neighborhoods, we publish data about the population and age. They're all available on our website. Well, I have to be frank, our website is not very user-friendly. But do you want a user-friendly website or a secure website? The other public institutions may have user-friendly websites, but we publish statistics almost every day. Yes, the way we present the statistics may not be very shiny or attractive. That's why we opt for security, because the data we publish have strong impact on the stock exchange and financial markets as well. At the neighborhood level, we have statistics on age and population. So when the municipalities are building new neighborhoods, we provide statistics to them. Whenever the local government applies to us through our official channels of communication, we provide them with information on neighborhoods. Thank you. Let me continue with another question from the audience. Ayşegül, this is for you. Ayşegül said that she's collecting data on Instagram. I think it's a controversial issue. I don't know whether I should be scared or not. I mean, all our data is available on Instagram and other social media resources. In fact, we collect data, we compile data by using open source software on social media networks. There are organizations which sell such information, but you have to pay large sums or large amounts. When we decided to set foot on this path, we had to make a decision whether to build this capacity within our institution or whether to buy or pay for this information. We calculated the pros and cons, and we saw that when you pay for data, sometimes the data does not come the way you want. I make an analysis on Instagram. Instagram assigns an ID to each and every location, and I want coordinates because I'm going to see them on the map. So if you want to use the data in a long-term perspective, then it's better to build the capacity within your own organization. You can use open source software like Java. So next question is for you again. We're speaking of big data. Is it sufficient to understand the city? Today I talked about big data, but of course, now that we're working on economic policies, we use small data as well. We use data from TÜİK, World Bank, IMF, Eurostat, and different data sets from the ministries in Turkey, like the Ministry of Tourism, Culture. All this data is publicly available. In my presentation, I mentioned big data several times, and big data is defined in different ways. What I mean by big data is structured or unstructured data. So someone has cleared the data for us, put it in an Excel table. But sometimes there's data which is not cleared. You have to take it, you have to process it and categorize it. According to literature, data coming from TÜİK is not considered as big data. So, in a project, we have to collect commercial data, and you can benefit from the statistics of TÜİK, and you need 10,000 different pieces of data, for instance, but TÜİK offers that data to you in sets of 25 pieces. You have to extract them one by one, which is why you write a code, and the code makes that analysis for you. So the data coming from TÜİK is not big data, but we process it as if it's big data. Yes, that type of data is not called big data. We call it large scale or voluminous data. So big data means a set of data which is fed by different channels on a continuous basis. Data from Facebook is big data, or data from Instagram is big data, or data from supermarket or tax register data is considered to be big data. Any other questions from the audience? Microphone, please. We cannot hear the question without the microphone. I have this book with me. I can give it to you. Ministry of Interior has a series of 11 books about population and migration. And this book is written in an understandable language. It is very simple and plain. They asked us to prepare this book on statistics, actually. It was a demand from the Ministry of Interior. We have definitions, we have current data, and up-to-date statistics. I have it with me. I can give one to you. Well, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Microphone, please. How do you see the future of research companies? Ibrahim Uslu says that the research companies will have difficulties in finding jobs for themselves. But there is a window of opportunity for research companies. It is big data. Well, there are two dimensions, as mentioned by Ibrahim. In theory, if there is an oversupply of data which is publicly available, then you may not need research companies to work for you to find that data. With online tools and technology, it's much easier to conduct large-scale questionnaires. It's true. But for Turkey, it's still too early, actually. I don't want to start another discussion, but if you want to draw a security map for Istanbul, and if you are the head of police in charge of security, you need data at a very detailed level, like where do Syrians live, in which neighborhoods there is potential for conflict between two ethnic backgrounds. And state in Turkey does not want to keep such data because the state may be criticized of tagging or labeling people. In Turkey, we ignore such differences, actually, but they are reality. For this reason, the state is not very comfortable of keeping data about ethnic minorities or ethnic backgrounds. The biggest problem for Turkey is the Kurdish issue, and only public institutions in Turkey have sound data about the Kurdish issue. But of course, this is in theory. We still need research institutions actually, because the state may not be able to keep such data. Last week, there was a research. 17% of people in Turkey invested in Bitcoin. But the rest of Turkey may not know anything about Bitcoin. So when you make that announcement about Bitcoin investments, you may be criticized by people, actually. So everybody talks about the future of research companies. Yes, things will change. And we still will need research companies because the definition of research will change as well. So there is no running away from us. Well, thank you. Let's conclude the session if you don't have any further questions, but I think we have. It's a question and a contribution. I'm working for the research department of Beşiktaş municipality. Now that we have experts here, I'd like to speak of this problem. The population of Beşiktaş is 2 million, but in 2014 there was a drop of population, a very dramatic reduction actually. I wanted to look for the reasons. I wanted to gather data, but finding data was very difficult. Data is kept at Ankara, they said, and can we think of a mechanism whereby we keep data about municipality population at the municipal level? I mean, municipalities can have such institutions or can have a unit for keeping statistics. We should not rely only on national data because municipalities are the first place when people have a problem. So my question is, we have passive ways of data collection, qualitative and quantitative research methodologies. Can we think of a system or a platform which is publicly available and which is kept by municipalities? Can we trigger better and more organized ways of collecting data at municipalities? How can we establish such a system? In 2009, the system was changed and the muhtars at local level were they took the authority of muhtars to have thorough information about the people living in the neighborhood. They cannot monitor that system. Well, in my understanding, the research companies will still keep on working. We're talking about a framework here. In the quantitative or qualitative researches, you may not be able to see certain data. We need a sound framework for research to be built on. Private sector and academia should start with that sound basis actually. I don't want to be misunderstood actually. As I underlined in my presentation, big data can never replace research statistics. Big data is only used as a support mechanism actually. The population of Beşiktaş, you mentioned, dropped significantly in 2014. There may be a particular reason for this, of course, but it also depends on your benchmark years. Istanbul has a very interesting demographic structure. For the last couple of years, there is an outside migration from Istanbul. And back in the 1950s and 60s, there was an influx of people from eastern provinces to Istanbul. And in the last 2 years, we saw a tendency among these people to go back to their hometowns. Think of a student who lives in one province and he moves to Ankara to study. So he has to make a declaration to change his address, but sometimes the student doesn't declare the address change. That's why we mainly work with other public institutions like the students' organization, ministries, to find about such shifts. The system I have in my mind is such that data is remotely available, just like microdata. So that the micro data sets are always available for users with a password. This is how things are done outside of Turkey actually. We have to establish such a system, and it is in our minds actually. It's in our strategic plan for the IT infrastructure in Turkey. Naturally, we're talking about personal data, and data must be protected. If personal data is hacked or revealed, then it means that we will never be able to use that data again. So we first have to provide the security for that system. When we have 100% security, then we will install that system. I think we came to the end of the day. Let's call it a day. Thank you very much for your attention and have a good evening.